The July heat turned Washington Square Park into a slow-motion chaos of tourists, street performers, and New Yorkers desperate for any scrap of shade. Near the iconic fountain, where hundreds of people moved in oblivious streams around each other, a small figure stood absolutely still. She couldn't have been older than 5. Her white dress, the kind that cost more than most people's rent, was wrinkled and dusty at the hem. Expensive patent leather shoes, scuffed at the toes. Tiny hands clutched a stuffed rabbit like it was the only solid thing in a tilting world. And she was crying. Not the loud, attention-grabbing wail of a child throwing a tantrum, but the silent, hiccuping sobs of someone who had learned that screaming doesn't always bring help. People flowed around her like water around a stone. A jogger nearly collided with her, adjusted his path at the last second without breaking stride. A group of college students laughed past, their eyes sliding over her as if she were part of the scenery. Everyone had somewhere to be, something more important than a crying child in designer clothes. Everyone except Donna Turner. I'd never been good at looking away when something felt wrong. Maybe it was the 7 years I spent bouncing between foster homes, learning to recognize that particular brand of fear in a kid's eyes. Maybe it was just who I was. Either way, when I saw that little girl standing there, frozen and terrified while the world ignored her, I felt my chest tighten with a familiar anger. I was supposed to be making deliveries. The orange insulated bag strapped to my back held someone's $47 order of Thai food that was getting colder by the second, and my delivery app was already pinging with increasingly aggressive notifications. 3 jobs, 18-hour days, student loans that felt like they'd follow me to my grave. That was my life. Keep moving, stay invisible, pay the bills. But I'd learned Korean for a reason. That year teaching English in Seoul after college wasn't just about running away from my problems or paying off debt. It was about finding something that felt like mine, a language that connected me to a culture that had shown me more warmth in 12 months than I'd known in my first 18 years. I swung my bike against the fountain's edge and crossed to her. "Hey, sweetie," I said gently, crouching down to her level. "Are you okay? Are you lost?" She looked at me with eyes so dark they were nearly black, swimming with tears. Her little mouth moved, but no sound came out at first. Then, so quietly I almost missed it.
"Mama."
In Korean. My heart cracked open. I said softly, switching languages as naturally as breathing. "Don't cry, it's okay. I'll help you." The effect was instant. Her eyes went wide, locked onto my face like I'd just performed a miracle. A shuddering breath, and then she launched herself at me, tiny arms wrapping around my neck with desperate strength. I caught her, held her, felt her whole body shaking against mine. I asked into her hair, "What's your name?" "Jiyoon," she whispered.
"Jiyoon."
"That's a beautiful name." "I'm Donna. Can you tell me where you're?" I felt it before I saw it. That shift in the air that happens when predators enter space. The crowd wasn't just flowing anymore, it was parting. 5 men in black suits moved through Washington Square Park like sharks through shallow water. Tailored jackets that couldn't quite hide the bulk of weapons underneath. Hands hovering near their sides with the casual alertness of people trained to kill. They moved with synchronized precision, scanning faces, eliminating possibilities with cold efficiency. And leading them was a man who made every survival instinct I had start screaming. Lee Jae-won. I didn't know his name yet. Didn't know he was the head of the most powerful Korean-American crime family on the East Coast, or that he'd been searching for his daughter for the last 47 minutes while his world tilted on its axis, with the specific terror only a parent can know. All I knew was that this man, mid-30s, sharp-featured, with eyes like flint and a presence that commanded immediate attention, had just locked onto me and the child in my arms with an intensity that made my blood run cold. He stopped 6 feet away, close enough that I could see the barely controlled fury in the set of his jaw, the way his hands flexed at his sides. Far enough that his men could move if needed. Those cold eyes swept over Jiyoon, checking for injuries with a thoroughness that spoke of practice and dread. Then they moved to me. 3 heartbeats. The world narrowed to just his gaze. I watched recognition flicker across his face, not of me, but of what I represented. This stranger who was speaking Korean to his daughter. This unknown variable who had touched his most precious thing. Ji-yoon had gone completely still in my arms, her breath caught. She whispered,
Daddy.
His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Relief, maybe. Or calculation. He spoke without looking away from me, his voice low and controlled. Find out everything about her. One of his men, a hard-faced lieutenant with a scar across his knuckles, pulled out his phone and captured my face in a photo before I could even process what was happening. Jaewon moved forward then, and every muscle in my body wanted to run. Instead, I held my ground, tightening my arms protectively around Ji-yoon. He stopped directly in front of me and spoke in perfect, unaccented English. Thank you for finding my daughter. It wasn't a question. Wasn't really a thank you either. It was an acknowledgement that I'd stepped into his world, that I'd become a person of interest, that my life had just become infinitely more complicated than delivering pad thai to Manhattan apartments. He held out his arms for Ji-yoon. She went to him without hesitation, wrapping herself around him with the same desperate relief she'd shown me. He held her like she was made of glass and steel at the same time, one hand cradling her head against his shoulder, his eyes briefly closing. When he opened them again, they were back on me. Weighing, measuring, deciding. You speak Korean, he said. It wasn't a question.
Yes.
I taught in Seoul for a year. She spoke to you. Still not a question. He knew. She was scared. I just wanted to help. And you did. He studied me for another long moment, and I had the unsettling feeling of being examined under a microscope. What's your name? Something told me lying would be stupid.
Donna.
Donna Turner. Donna Turner. He repeated it like he was committing it to memory. Or maybe his lieutenant was already running a background check. Thank you for your kindness to my daughter. You have my gratitude. The way he said gratitude made it sound like both a gift and a threat. He turned to leave, his security team reforming around him, and Ji-yoon like a human fortress. But before they disappeared into the crowd, he glanced back over his shoulder. Our eyes met one last time, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that this wasn't over. Not even close. Before we find out just how deep Donna is about to fall into this dangerous world, hit that subscribe button. Because what happens next? You won't believe where this story goes. Trust me, you don't want to miss a single twist. I told myself I was being paranoid. The black sedan that appeared outside the Vietnamese restaurant on East 9th Street while I waited for a pickup? Coincidence. The same car, or one exactly like it, idling 3 blocks away when I delivered ramen to a walk-up in Chelsea? New York was full of black sedans. The man in the gray jacket who seemed to be at the bodega on my corner at 7 a.m. and then somehow at the coffee shop in Midtown at 2 p.m.? The city had 8 million people. You saw the same faces sometimes. By day 3, I stopped lying to myself. They weren't trying to hide anymore. Maybe they never had been. A black Mercedes with tinted windows that tracked me through 6 deliveries across Manhattan, always staying 2 or 3 car lengths back. A woman in designer sunglasses who sat on the same park bench for 3 hours, her attention never quite leaving me as I locked up my bike. A man who pretended to read a newspaper outside my apartment building, an actual physical newspaper, like it was 1995, while I hauled my bike up the front steps. I started taking different routes. Cutting through alleys, doubling back on myself. All the evasive maneuvers you learn growing up in neighborhoods where being followed could mean something bad. It didn't matter. They were always there. Professional. Patient. Inevitable. The worst part wasn't the fear, though there was plenty of that. The worst part was not knowing what they wanted. Were they making sure I didn't talk to anyone? Waiting for me to lead them somewhere? Or just watching? By the 4th night, I was exhausted, paranoid, and ready to snap at anyone who looked at me wrong. Which is probably why I nearly bit Rachel's head off when she asked if I wanted pizza. Jesus, Donna, what's wrong with you? My roommate stared at me from the kitchen doorway of our cramped East Village apartment, her hand still on the pizza box. You've been weird all week. I sat on our thrift store couch, my delivery bag finally off my shoulders, and pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes. I think I'm being followed. Silence. Then, okay, we're definitely talking about this. Rachel abandoned the pizza, sat down next to me, and fixed me with the same no-nonsense expression that had gotten her through nursing school. Start from the beginning. So I told her. The little girl in the park. The Korean. The man with the dangerous eyes, and the security team that moved like soldiers. The surveillance that had started the very next day. Wait. Rachel held up a hand. Describe the guy again. The father. Korean, maybe mid-30s. Expensive suit, like custom expensive. Sharp features, really intense eyes. Moved like. I searched for the right word. Like he owned everything he looked at. Rachel was already pulling out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. Korean. Crime family. New York. Her eyes went wide. Oh shit. What? She turned her phone toward me. Is this him? The photo was from some charity gala. A man in a tuxedo, perfectly groomed, shaking hands with the mayor. But I'd recognize those eyes anywhere, even in a photograph, even softened by a polite smile that didn't quite reach them. Lee Jae-won. The caption identified him as a prominent businessman and philanthropist. That's him, I whispered. Rachel started scrolling, her expression growing more concerned with each article. Okay, so publicly he's a real estate developer and import-export guy. Sits on charity boards, funds community centers in Koreatown, collects art.
She paused.
But there's other stuff too. Articles that got pulled. A federal investigation that went nowhere. Reddit threads about his family's connections to organized crime in Korea and here. Nothing proven, but everyone knows, I finished.
Yeah.
Rachel looked up at me. Donna, if this guy is who they say he is, if even half of this is true, you can't just ignore this. These people don't follow random delivery drivers for fun. I helped his daughter. That's all I did. And now he knows you speak Korean, knows you were kind to his kid, and apparently finds you interesting enough to put a surveillance team on you. Rachel grabbed my shoulders. This is serious. You need to. I don't know, go to the police? Leave town? Something. And tell them what? A man thanked me for helping his daughter, and now I think I'm being watched? They'll laugh me out of the station. Then what are you going to do? I didn't have an answer. What could I do? Keep delivering food and pretend I didn't notice the cars? Confront the next person I caught following me? Run and hope that whatever this was would just stop? The next morning, I found the envelope. It was cream-colored, expensive, with my name written on the front in elegant handwriting. No address, no stamp. Someone had slipped it under our apartment door during the night. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a first-class ticket to Arirang Palace, a Korean restaurant in Koreatown I'd walked past 100 times but could never afford to enter. The reservation was for 7 p.m. that evening, a private dining room. And beneath the ticket, a note on matching cream stationery, written in perfect Korean calligraphy. We need to talk about my daughter.
Come alone.
You have nothing to fear. This is simply a conversation. LJW. I read it 3 times. The handwriting was beautiful, controlled, the kind that took years of practice to master. The message was polite, almost formal. But there was something underneath it, not quite a threat, but definitely not a request I could refuse. You have nothing to fear.
Right.
Because powerful men who run surveillance teams on random strangers and summon them to private meetings are totally trustworthy. Rachel found me standing in the kitchen, still staring at the note. What's that? I handed it to her silently. She read it, her face going pale. Donna, you can't seriously be considering. What choice do I have? I turned to face her. They know where I live, Rachel. They know where I work, what route I bike, probably what I eat for breakfast. Running isn't an option. Ignoring it isn't an option. So what's left? Going to meet the head of a crime family alone in a private room? He said I have nothing to fear. And you believe him? The honest answer was I didn't know. But I kept thinking about the way he'd held his daughter. The relief in his eyes. The fact that if he'd wanted to hurt me, he'd had 4 days and dozens of opportunities to do it. I believe, I said slowly, that if I don't show up, this doesn't end. And I'm tired of being followed. Rachel grabbed my hand. If you're going, I'm tracking your location on my phone. And I'm calling the cops if you're not back by 10. Deal. At 6:45 p.m., I stood outside Ararang Palace in the only dress I owned that didn't have bike grease on it, watching the sun sink behind the buildings of Koreatown. The restaurant's windows glowed with warm light. Normal people were inside having normal dinners with their normal families. I took a breath, touched the phone in my pocket one more time for reassurance, and walked inside to meet the man who'd been haunting my life for a week. Whatever happened next, at least the waiting would be over. The hostess who greeted me at Ararang Palace was immaculately dressed and utterly unsurprised by my arrival. She simply smiled, said, "Miss Turner, this way please," and led me past the main dining room where families shared banchan and grilled meat, past a hallway lined with watercolor paintings of Korean landscapes, to a door at the very back. She knocked once, received some response I couldn't hear, and opened it. Lee Jae-won stood as I entered. The private dining room was small but exquisite. Traditional Korean aesthetics mixed with modern luxury, a low black table surrounded by silk cushions, paper screens filtering soft light, and a window overlooking a tiny garden that shouldn't have been possible in the middle of Manhattan. The table was set for two and covered with dishes. Not just a few plates, but an entire traditional Korean meal spread across every available surface. Japchae, galbi, 3 kinds of kimchi, various banchan I couldn't even name, steamed rice in stone bowls still crackling. "Ms. Turner." He gestured to the cushion across from him. "Please sit. Thank you for coming." I stood frozen in the doorway. He wore a different suit than the one from the park, charcoal gray, equally expensive, but without a tie. The top button of his shirt was undone. It should have made him look relaxed. It didn't. "You said we needed to talk about Jiun." I managed. "We do. But you should eat first. You've been working since 6 this morning." He said it like a fact, not a guess. Because of course he knew my schedule. He probably knew my blood type. I should have been terrified. Part of me was. But I was also exhausted, hungry, and oddly fascinated by the spread in front of me. When was the last time someone had cooked for me? Really cooked, not just split a pizza or grab takeout. I sat. Jaewon settled across from me with the controlled grace of someone who'd trained in martial arts. "Do you know what all of this is?" He gestured to the table. "Some of it. I'm better at speaking Korean than I am at cooking it." "Then let me introduce you." For the next few minutes, he walked me through each dish with the kind of patient detail that felt surreal given the circumstances. This was banchan. This particular preparation was from Jeolla province. His grandmother used to make it this way. His voice was low, measured, almost hypnotic. Not once did he mention surveillance teams or crime families, or why I was really here. I tried a piece of the galbi. It melted in my mouth. "It's incredible," I said before I could stop myself. "The chef here trained in Seoul for 15 years. I asked him to prepare this specially." He paused, his eyes meeting mine. "I wanted you to understand that this conversation comes from a place of respect and gratitude. For helping your daughter. For seeing her." He set down his chopsticks carefully. 300 people walked past Jiun that day. You were the only one who stopped. The only one who spoke to her in a language that made her feel safe. Do you understand what that means to me? The intensity in his voice made my chest tighten. She was scared. Anyone would have. But they didn't. You did. He leaned forward slightly. "Which brings me to why you're here. I need to explain something about my daughter, and I need you to listen carefully." The shift in his tone made me put down my own chopsticks. 6 months ago, he said quietly, Jiun's mother was taken from our home. Kidnapped by rivals who wanted to send me a message. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. They sent her back to us in pieces. The air left my lungs. Jiun was at her grandmother's house that night. She didn't see what happened, but she understood enough. She was 5 years old, and she understood that her mother was gone and never coming back. His hands, resting on the table, had gone completely still. She stopped speaking English entirely the day we buried her mother. Just stopped. She only speaks Korean now. Won't respond to anything else. It's like she's trying to retreat into a place where none of this happened. I thought about that little girl clutching her rabbit, the way she'd collapsed into my arms when I'd spoken her language. I've hired nannies, Jae-won continued. 6 of them. All Korean-speaking, all highly qualified. She tolerates them but doesn't connect. I've brought in child psychologists, trauma specialists, people with decades of experience. She sits in their offices and says nothing.
He paused.
And then you spoke to her in a park, and within 30 seconds, she was in your arms. I don't understand what you want from me. I want you to help her heal. He said it simply, like it was the most natural request in the world. I want to offer you a position as Ji-yoon's live-in guardian and Korean language tutor. You'd move into my home, work with her every day, be the consistent presence she clearly responds to. You want me to move into your house? With you? I don't even. The salary is $30,000 a month. I actually laughed. It came out slightly hysterical. I'm sorry, did you just say 30? Plus room and board. Full benefits. Your student loans would be paid off in less than a year. He watched my face carefully. I've done my research, Miss Turner. I know you work 3 different delivery jobs. I know you're drowning in debt from a degree you can't use because the art world doesn't pay enough to survive in this city. I'm offering you a way out. My mind spun. $30,000. Monthly. I currently made maybe $3,000 if I work myself to exhaustion. This was life-changing money. This was freedom. Why would you pay that much for basically a nanny? Because you're not a nanny. You're the person my daughter trusted instinctively. You're fluent in Korean, educated, and you have something none of those specialists had. You made her feel safe. His gaze never wavered. I'm not paying for childcare, Miss Turner. I'm paying for my daughter's recovery. I stared at the table, at the beautiful meal I could never afford, at the life I could never have. This is insane. You don't know anything about me. I know everything about me. There was no threat in his voice, just fact. Donna Marie Turner. Born in Detroit. Mother died of an overdose when you were 2. Father unknown. Foster care until 18. Full scholarship to NYU. Graduated with honors in linguistics. Spent a year teaching English in Seoul. Returned to New York 2 years ago. No criminal record, no close family, 1 roommate, 3 jobs, $38,000 in student loan debt. My stomach turned cold. You had me investigated. Of course I did. My daughter's safety is involved. He leaned back slightly. But here's what the investigation doesn't tell me. It doesn't tell me why you stopped in that park. Why you learned Korean in the first place. Why you chose to help instead of walking away like everyone else. So, you're offering me money to be what, exactly? A companion? A therapist? A bridge, he said simply. Between where my daughter is now and where she needs to be. Someone who speaks her language in every sense. Someone she already trusts. It was too much. Too fast. I stood up, my hands shaking. I need to think about this. Of course. He stood as well, his movements controlled. But before you leave, I need you to understand something. There it was. The shift I'd been waiting for. His expression didn't change, but something in the air did. You're already involved now, Miss Turner. Whether you accept this offer or not, whether you work for me or walk out that door and never look back, you're under my protection. He said it calmly, matter-of-factly. That's not negotiable. The people who killed my wife have people who would see you as a vulnerability. You spoke to my daughter. You know her face. That makes you a target. Are you threatening me? I'm protecting you. There's a difference. He took a step closer, and I forced myself not to back away. If you take this job, you'll live in my home behind security that would make the Secret Service jealous. If you don't, you'll still have a security team following you everywhere you go. Either way, your old life is over. I'm offering you the chance to have a new one that matters. My throat was tight. You're saying I don't have a choice. You have a choice. His voice softened slightly. You can choose to help my daughter heal and be compensated generously for it. Or you can choose to go back to delivering food with armed guards watching your every move. Those are your options. I'm sorry they're not better ones, But I didn't create the situation. I'm just dealing with the reality of it. I wanted to scream, to run, to tell him exactly where he could shove his job offer and his protection and his $30,000. But he was right. The moment I'd spoken Korean to Jiun, something had changed. I'd become part of his world, whether I wanted to be or not. I need time, I said finally. You have 24 hours. He pulled a card from his pocket and held it out. My private number. Call me with your decision. I took the card. Our fingers didn't touch. The meal was beautiful, I heard myself say. Thank you. It was the least I could offer. He walked me to the door, opened it himself. Donna? I turned back. My daughter smiled for the first time in 6 months after you spoke to her. Whatever you decide, thank you for giving me that. The door closed behind me, and I stood in the hallway trying to remember how to breathe. 24 hours to decide if I was ready to step into a world I didn't understand, working for a man who terrified me, taking care of a traumatized child who deserved so much better than any of this. 24 hours to choose between the life I had and the life I'd never imagined possible. I walked out of Ararang Palace into the neon-lit streets of Koreatown, Jaewon's card burning a hole in my pocket, and wondered if I'd already made my choice the moment I'd stopped in that park. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on our fire escape until 3 a.m., watching the city that never quite went dark, turning Jaewon's card over and over in my hands. Rachel had given up trying to talk me out of it around midnight, settling instead for making me promise I'd set boundaries. If you're doing this, she'd said, don't lose yourself in it. At 6 a.m., I called the number on the card. He answered on the first ring. Ms. Turner. I'll do it, I said before I could change my mind. But I have conditions. I'm listening. I need 1 day off per week, non-negotiable. I keep my own phone, my own email, my own connections to the outside world. And I need to know that if I ever feel unsafe or compromised, I can walk away. There was a pause. The first 2 are acceptable. The third is more complicated. Then make it less complicated. If you want to leave, you can leave. But the protection stays. That's for your safety, not my control.
His voice was steady.
Anything else? If you ask me to do something that crosses my ethical lines, I won't do it. I'm there for Jiun, not for anything else. Understood. Can you be ready by noon? Today? My daughter has waited 6 months for someone who can help her. I won't make her wait longer than necessary. 3 hours later, a black Mercedes pulled up outside my building. The same one that had been following me all week. At least now I knew why. Rachel hugged me so tight, I could barely breathe. Text me every day. Call me if anything feels wrong. And Donna, don't forget who you are in there. I won't. I promised, hoping it was true. The driver was a quiet man named Kim who loaded my 2 suitcases, everything I owned, with the kind of efficiency that suggested military training. We drove uptown in silence, and I watched my old neighborhood disappear in the side mirror. Jaewon's building was in the East 60s, the kind of address that made my student loans feel even more crushing by comparison. The lobby was all marble and understated wealth, with a doorman who nodded at Kim like they'd known each other for years. A private elevator. A key card. Ascending. The penthouse took up the entire top floor. The doors opened directly into the apartment, and I stepped into a space that felt like it existed in a different reality. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, bulletproof glass, so clear you'd never know it could stop a rifle round. Modern furniture in clean lines and neutral tones, but everywhere I looked there were touches of Korea, traditional pottery in display cases, a scroll painting on one wall, mother-of-pearl inlay on a cabinet that probably cost more than a car. Ms. Turner. A woman in her 60s appeared from somewhere deeper in the apartment, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, her expression warm but assessing. I'm Mrs. Kong. I manage the household. Donna, please. Donna. She smiled. Mr. Lee is in a meeting, but he asked me to show you around and get you settled. Jiun is with her tutor, the academic tutor, for math and reading. You'll meet her at lunch. Mrs. Kong walked me through the space with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this before. The kitchen was restaurant quality. The living areas flowed into each other with careful design. Security panels were hidden behind artwork. There were panic rooms I hoped I'd never need to use. My bedroom was larger than the entire apartment I'd shared with Rachel. Private bathroom with a soaking tub. A view of the park. Closet space I'd never fill. "This is too much," I said quietly. Mrs. Kang's expression softened. "Mr. Lee believes in taking care of the people who matter to his daughter. You'll get used to it." She paused at the door. "May I speak plainly?" "Please." "I've been with this family for 12 years. I watched Jiyoon being born. I watched her mother." She stopped, composed herself. "Hannah was a good woman.
Kind.
She tried to shield Jiyoon from what her father was, what this life meant. And then they took her, and everything shattered." "Mrs. Kang, I'm telling you this because you need to understand what you're walking into. Mr. Lee is not a normal man. His business is not normal. The people who want to hurt him will use any weapon they can find, including you." Her eyes held mine. "But I've also never seen him care about anyone the way he cares about his daughter. If you can help her, if you can bring back even a piece of who she was before, he'll move heaven and earth to protect you." "That's what I'm afraid of." "Good. Fear will keep you careful." She patted my arm. "But don't let it keep you from connecting with Jiyoon. That child needs someone who sees her, not just the tragedy." Lunch was in the dining room, around a table that could seat 12 but held only 3. Jaewon sat at the head in shirt sleeves, his jacket discarded somewhere, looking more human than I'd seen him yet. And beside him, in a booster seat, was Jiyoon. She looked up when I entered, and her whole face transformed. "Donna." She scrambled down from her chair and ran to me, grabbing my hand. "Donna, big sister." Something in my chest cracked open.
Jiyoon.
"Hi, Jiyoon. Have you been well?" She nodded vigorously, pulling me toward the table. "Daddy, this is Donna." Jaewon's expression as he watched us was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that looked almost like relief. "Yes, Jiyoona. Donna is going to be staying with us now. She's going to help you with your Korean, spend time with you. Every day." Jiyoon looked up at me with such hope it hurt. "Every day," I confirmed. Over the next 2 weeks, we built a routine. Mornings were for structured learning. I'd brought workbooks, created games, turned language practice into play. Jiyoon was bright, quick, soaking up everything like she'd been starved for this kind of attention. We cooked together in the afternoons, simple recipes that let her measure and stir and feel accomplished. Mrs. Kang taught us both, her patience infinite. Evenings were for stories. I'd find Jiyoon curled up in her reading nook, surrounded by Korean picture books, and we'd work through them together. Her voice got stronger each day, the English words starting to creep back in around the edges of her Korean. And Jaewon. Jaewon was a revelation. The man I'd met in the park, all cold calculation and controlled danger, disappeared when he came home to his daughter. He'd walk through the door at 6, no matter what meeting he'd been in, and Jiyoon would shriek and launch herself at him. He'd catch her, spin her around, and become someone completely different. He did voices for her stuffed animals. Terrible voices, dramatic and silly, making up elaborate stories that had her giggling so hard she'd hiccup. He sang lullabies in Korean, old folk songs his grandmother had taught him, his voice surprisingly gentle. He let her paint his nails sparkly purple and wore them to business meetings the next day without comment. I'd watch from the doorway sometimes, this feared crime boss playing tea party with his 5-year-old, and struggle to reconcile the two versions of him. One night, after Jiyoon had finally fallen asleep clutching her rabbit, I found him on the rooftop garden. The space was beautiful, bamboo, cherry trees, stone lanterns, a small pond with koi. Impossible and perfect. "She's asleep," I said quietly. He nodded, not turning from where he stood looking out over the city. "Thank you. For today, for every day this week. She's..." His voice roughened. "She's coming back. She's an amazing kid."
She is.
Because of her mother. He finally looked at me. "And now because of you. I'm just speaking Korean with her, teaching her some games. You're giving her a reason to speak at all." He turned fully to face me. I haven't heard her laugh like that since before Hannah died. Do you understand what that means to me? The intensity in his voice made my breath catch. I'm glad I can help. It's more than help, Donna. He stopped himself, jaw tightening. Thank you. That's what I meant to say. Just thank you. I nodded, something shifting in the air between us, and wondered when I'd stopped being afraid of him. When I'd started seeing the man instead of the monster. And whether that made me brave or foolish. 6 weeks into living in Jaewon's penthouse, I woke at 2 a.m. to the sound of muffled voices from the floor below. I'd learned the rhythms of the apartment by then. Mrs. Kang's early morning tea preparation, Ji-yoon's nightmare wake-ups, the security rotations every 4 hours. But this was different. Multiple male voices, tense and low, speaking rapid Korean I couldn't quite make out through the floors. I crept to my door, cracked it open. From the landing I could see down into Jaewon's office, where 5 men in suits stood around his desk. One had blood on his collar. Jaewon sat perfectly still, his voice calm and controlled as he issued instructions in Korean, but there was something in his posture that made my skin prickle. This was the other side of his life. The side that had killed his wife. I retreated before anyone could notice me watching, but sleep didn't come back that night. The next morning, Jaewon appeared at breakfast looking as composed as ever, drinking coffee and reviewing something on his tablet while Ji-yoon chatted about the butterfly book we'd been reading. There was no sign of whatever crisis had unfolded in the dark hours. He asked Ji-yoon about her dreams, complimented her on using a new vocabulary word, kissed her forehead before excusing himself to work. Only the faint shadows under his eyes suggested he'd slept as little as I had. But as the weeks accumulated into months, I started seeing beyond the surface. The way his legitimate businesses, the import company, the real estate holdings employed hundreds of Korean immigrants, many who could barely speak English. The scholarship fund he'd quietly established for children in Koreatown, never publicized, never mentioned. Mrs. Kong told me about the worker who'd been injured on one of his construction sites, how Jaewon had paid for 3 surgeries and kept him on payroll through a year of recovery. He's not a good man, Mrs. Kong said one afternoon while we folded Ji-yoon's laundry. But he tries to do good things. It's more complicated than people want it to be. Rachel's texts had become increasingly urgent. This isn't normal. You know that, right? You're living with a criminal. He's Ji-yoon's father. I texted back. And she's healing. What about you? Are you healing or are you just getting comfortable in a cage? I didn't have an answer for that. Something was shifting, and I felt it most during dinner. Jaewon had started joining us for meals more regularly, not just the rushed breakfasts or late dinners when Ji-yoon was already asleep. He'd sit with us in the kitchen while we cooked, asking Ji-yoon about her day, listening with absolute attention as she explained the game we'd invented or the story we'd written. And then his attention would drift to me, and we'd talk. At first it was surface-level things. Did I need anything? Was I comfortable? How did I think Ji-yoon was progressing? But gradually, as Ji-yoon played after dinner and we lingered over tea, the conversations deepened. He asked about Seoul, about what had drawn me there. I found myself telling him about the year I'd spent teaching, how I'd felt more at home in a country where I didn't speak the language fluently than I'd ever felt in America. There's something about being displaced, I said. It forces you to see yourself clearly, without all the context and history weighing you down. I understand that. He turned his cup slowly on the table. My parents came here with nothing, built everything from scratch. They wanted me to be American but also never forget where we came from. It's an impossible balance. Is that why you speak Korean to Ji-yoon? To keep her connected?
Partly.
But also because... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Her mother spoke to her in Korean. It's the last piece of Hannah. She has that no one can take away. We talked about poetry one evening after Ji-yoon had begged him to read her a story. He'd chosen a Korean folk tale, his voice gentle, and afterward he'd mentioned that Hannah had loved folk tales, how she'd collected different versions from different regions. Do you read poetry? I asked.
Some.
Mostly Ko-won, Chung Ho-sung. The poets of displacement and loss. A ghost of a smile. Happy subject matter. I loved Choi Sung-ho when I was in Seoul. The way she writes about identity, about being caught between worlds. His eyes lit up, barely noticeable, but I'd learned to read his micro-expressions. You've read The Language of Leaving?
3 times.
I tried to translate some of it into English for a class project. Failed miserably. Translation is impossible, he said. You're not just changing words, you're changing the entire cultural context, the sounds, the weight of history in each character. Exactly. Everyone acts like it's just finding equivalent words, but it's like trying to explain color to someone who's never seen it, he finished. We looked at each other across the table, and something hummed in the air between us. A recognition. An understanding that went beyond language, beyond the circumstances that had brought us together. Rachel texted the next day, "You haven't mentioned coming to visit in 3 weeks. You okay?" "I'm fine."
Just busy.
Busy or avoiding. You know you can leave, right? You don't owe him anything. But that was the thing, I wasn't staying because I owed him anything. I was staying because Jiyoon was thriving, her English coming back in full sentences, her nightmares decreasing. I was staying because Mrs. Kong made the best kimchi jjigae I'd ever tasted and had started teaching me her recipes. I was staying because for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel like I was drowning. And I was staying because when Jaewon looked at me across the dinner table and talked about poetry, I forgot to remember why I should be afraid. 3 months in, he asked me to come to his office after Jiyoon was asleep. My stomach clenched. The office was his domain, all dark wood and leather, the place where men with blood on their collars came for late-night meetings. I'd never been invited in. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "I want to show you something." He led me not to his desk, but to a door I'd assumed was a closet. He opened it, stepped back. Inside was a room I'd never seen before, converted into a study. Built-in bookshelves lined 2 walls, filled with Korean literature, novels, poetry collections, linguistics textbooks. A large desk faced the windows overlooking the garden. A state-of-the-art computer with translation software already installed. Dictionaries. Reference materials. Everything a translator could need. "What is this?" I whispered. "Your workspace." He watched my face carefully. My import business has international contracts that need translation. Korean to English, English to Korean. Legal documents, business correspondence. It's legitimate work, steady income beyond what I'm already paying you. You're offering me a job?
Another job.
I'm offering you a future. He stepped into the room, ran his hand along the bookshelf. You gave my daughter her voice back, Donna. Let me help you find yours. You're a linguist working as a nanny. That's not wrong, but it's not enough either. You deserve to use everything you studied for, everything you're capable of. I turned slowly, taking in the room. My own space. My own work. Why would you do this? Because you're not just Jiyoon's tutor anymore. You're part of this household. Part of. He stopped himself. You matter here. This is me acknowledging that. Jaewon. You don't have to answer now.
Just think about it.
The room is yours either way. He left me standing there, surrounded by books in 2 languages, overlooking a garden that shouldn't exist, in a life I'd never imagined possible. Rachel's voice echoed in my head. You're getting comfortable in a cage. But as I pulled a poetry collection from the shelf and opened it to a dog-eared page, I wondered if maybe comfort wasn't always a cage. Maybe sometimes it was just a place where you could finally breathe. Maybe that was dangerous too. The translation work started slowly, a few contracts here, some business correspondence there. I'd work in my new study after Jiyoon went to bed, losing myself in the precise art of carrying meaning across languages. Jaewon would sometimes appear in the doorway around 10, asking if I needed anything, if the software was working properly. He never stayed long. Never crossed the threshold without invitation. But the awareness between us had become a living thing. I felt it when our hands accidentally touched reaching for the same book to read to Jiyoon. When he'd catch my eye across the dinner table and forget what he was saying mid-sentence. When I'd find him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite name, intense and careful, and something else entirely. Mrs. Kong noticed. Of course she noticed. Be careful, she said one morning while we prepared breakfast, her voice gentle. Mr. Lee, he hasn't looked at anyone the way he looks at you since his wife died. That's either a beautiful thing or a dangerous one. Sometimes both. Nothing's happening, I said, too quickly. She just smiled sadly. Not yet. It was a Friday evening, for months into my time at the penthouse. Ji-yoon had gone to bed early, exhausted from a playdate with another Korean-American girl Mrs. Kong had carefully vetted. The apartment felt different in its quiet, more intimate. I'd been working in the study, stuck on a particularly tricky legal phrase, when Jaewon knocked softly on the open door. May I? He held up a bottle of wine. I should have said no. Should have kept the professional boundaries that were already blurring beyond recognition. Instead, I nodded. He poured 2 glasses, handed me one, and settled into the chair across from my desk. We talked about the translation I was struggling with, the way legal language resisted poetry. He offered suggestions with the ease of someone who'd lived between languages his entire life. An hour passed. The wine disappeared. The conversation drifted from work to literature to music to everything and nothing. He was telling me about a concert his mother had taken him to as a child, a traditional Korean performance that had made him cry, when I interrupted him. Why are you really doing all this? He stopped mid-sentence. What do you mean?
This.
I gestured around the study, at the books, the equipment, the space he'd created for me. The job, the room, everything. Ji-yoon is doing well. You don't need to keep. I struggled for the right words. You don't need to keep giving me things. What if I want to? Why? The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything we'd been carefully not saying for weeks. Jaewon set down his wine glass with deliberate control, but I saw his hand shake slightly. When he looked up, his careful mask had cracked. Do you want the polite answer or the truth? My heart hammered against my ribs. The truth. He stood, walked to the window overlooking the garden, his back to me.
For a long moment, he said nothing.
Then, because you walked into my life and reminded me what it feels like to hope. I couldn't breathe. I've spent the last 6 months existing, not living, just surviving, getting through each day, trying to hold my daughter together while everything inside me was broken. His voice was rough, stripped of its usual control. And then you spoke Korean to her in a park, and something shifted. Not just for Ji-yoon, for me. Jaewon. Let me finish. Please. He turned to face me, and the expression on his face made my chest ache. I watch you with my daughter. I watch you bring her back to life with patience and kindness and a gentleness I didn't think existed in the world anymore. I watch you at dinner, laughing at her jokes, teaching her words, making this apartment feel like a home instead of a fortress. He took a step closer. And I watch you here, doing work you love, finally using the skills you spent years developing, and it makes me believe. His voice cracked. It makes me believe we deserve more than survival. That maybe we deserve something good. What are you saying? I whispered. I'm saying I'm falling in love with you, Donna. I've been falling for weeks, maybe months, and I don't know how to stop. I don't think I want to stop. He laughed, bitter and broken. Which is incredibly selfish because you didn't sign up for this. You came here to help my daughter, and I'm standing here confessing feelings that will only complicate your life. I stood slowly, my legs unsteady. You think I haven't noticed? His eyes snapped to mine. What? You think I haven't felt it too? The way you look at me? The way I find excuses to stay up late hoping you'll come by? The way my heart races every time you're in the same room? I moved around the desk, closing the distance between us. I've been terrified for weeks, Jaewon. Terrified of exactly this. Terrified of what? Of wanting this. Of wanting you. The admission tore out of me. You're my employer. You're dangerous. You're everything I should run from. And somehow you've become the person I think about constantly. The person whose smile makes my whole day better. The person I stopped trembling. The person you what? His voice was barely audible. The person I've fallen in love with too. The air between us ignited. I didn't know who moved first. Maybe both of us. But suddenly his hands were framing my face and mine were fisted in his shirt and our mouths were crashing together with 4 months of denied wanting. The kiss was electric, desperate, dangerous. It tasted like wine and truth and the crossing of every line we'd carefully maintained. He kissed me like a drowning man finding air. Like I was the answer to a question he'd been too afraid to ask. His hand slid into my hair, and I gasped against his mouth, pulling him closer, needing more of whatever this was. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. "This is a terrible idea," he whispered. "I know. It changes everything. I know. We can't go back from this. I know." I pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "I don't want to go back." Something fierce and protective and almost frightening blazed in his expression. "If we do this, if we're together, you need to understand what that means. The danger doesn't decrease. It increases. Being the woman I love makes you a bigger target than being Jiyoon's tutor ever did." "The woman you love?" "Yes." No hesitation. "Is that going to scare you away?" It should have. Every logical part of my brain was screaming warnings. But I thought about the man who sang lullabies to his daughter, who'd created a space where I could finally be myself, who looked at me like I was something precious and fierce all at once.
"No," I said.
"It's not." He kissed me again, softer this time, reverent. "Then we'll figure this out together." Together, I agreed, and felt the last of my careful walls crumble. We stayed in the study for hours, talking and kissing and talking more. About what this meant. About how to navigate it with Jiyoon. About the fears and the complications and the impossible beauty of finding each other in the wreckage of our separate traumas. When I finally made it to my room near dawn, I lay in bed watching the sun rise over Central Park and knew with absolute certainty that my life had just changed irrevocably. I'd crossed the threshold from employee to something infinitely more complicated. And I'd never felt more terrified or more alive. They've crossed the line. But loving a dangerous man comes with a price, and it's about to come due. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now. The next part of this story will test everything Donna thought she could handle. The morning after felt surreal. I woke disoriented, my lips still tender from kissing, my mind replaying every word, every touch. For a few blissful seconds, I let myself float in the memory. Then reality crashed back in. I'd fallen in love with a crime boss. I'd kissed him. I'd told him I wanted this. What the hell had I done? Jiyoon bounced into my room at 7:30 like always, oblivious to the fact that her world had shifted overnight. "Donna, Mrs. Kong is making hotteok." She grabbed my hand, pulling me toward consciousness and normalcy and breakfast. Jaewon was already at the table, dressed for work, reading something on his tablet. When I entered with Jiyoon, his eyes found mine immediately. The look that passed between us, heat and promise and something deeper, made my stomach flip. "Good morning," he said, his voice carefully neutral for Jiyoon's benefit. "Morning." I busied myself with pouring coffee, hyper-aware of his presence, of the way the air felt charged. The day passed in a strange duality. On the surface, everything was normal. Jiyoon and I did lessons, played games, cooked lunch with Mrs. Kong. But underneath ran a current of anticipation. Every time my phone buzzed with a text from Jaewon thinking about you, or can't focus on this meeting, my heart would race. He came home early, claiming a cleared schedule. Jiyoon was delighted, demanding he help us bake cookies. I watched him measure flour with the same precision he probably used for business deals, flour dusting his rolled-up shirt sleeves, and felt something dangerous and tender bloom in my chest. After Jiyoon was in bed, he found me in the study. "We need to talk," he said, his expression serious. The words every person dreads. I set down my pen. "Okay." He closed the door behind him, leaned against it. Last night was everything I've wanted for months. But we can't move forward without you understanding exactly what being with me means. I know it's complicated. It's more than complicated, Donna. It's dangerous." He moved to sit across from me, his hands clasped on the desk. "I need you to hear this with clear eyes, not through the lens of what we felt last night."
"Can you do that?"
The shift in his tone made my pulse quicken. Yes. Being with me makes you a target. You already have protection because of Ji-yoon, but being my partner, the woman I love, that's different. That makes you leverage. That makes you someone my enemies will use to hurt me. His jaw tightened. And it makes you complicit in a world that operates by different rules than the one you've known. What rules? Violence. Loyalty enforced through fear. Money that comes from places you'd rather not think about. He held my gaze. I run a criminal organization, Donna. I can dress it up in legitimate business holdings and charitable donations, but at its core, that's what it is.
Can you live with that?
My mouth was dry. I don't know. Then we need to figure it out now. Before this goes any further. Before Ji-yoon gets attached to the idea of us together. He leaned forward. Ask me anything. Whatever you need to know to make this decision. The question I'd been avoiding for months rose to my lips. Have you killed people? He didn't flinch. Yes. The simple honesty of it hit me like a physical blow. How many? I don't keep count. But more than one. More than I can justify to someone like you who exists in the moral world I left behind a long time ago. Will you stop? If we're together, can you?
No. His voice was firm.
I can't promise that. My world doesn't work that way. If someone threatens my family, if someone breaks the rules we all operate under, if someone needs to be stopped and there's no other way, I can't promise I won't do what needs to be done. I stood, paced to the window, trying to process. Behind me, his voice continued, quieter now. Do you want to know if I regret it? I turned. Do you?
Some.
The first time, absolutely. I was 23, and my father's enemies came for him. I had a choice between watching him die or becoming something I'd never imagined I could be. His eyes were distant, remembering. I chose him. And everything that came after followed from that choice. And the others? Some I regret. Some I don't. The man who orchestrated my wife's kidnapping? I don't regret that one. The people who've tried to hurt Ji-yoon? No regret. He stood, walked toward me slowly. I'm not asking you to condone it. I'm asking you to understand that this is who I am. Who I have to be to protect the people I love. That's not normal, Jaewon. That's not. I know. Pain flickered across his face. Believe me, I know. Hannah struggled with it too. She loved me despite it, but she never fully accepted it. It was the wedge between us always. And now I'm asking you to make the same impossible choice she did. I wrapped my arms around myself. I need time. How much time? I don't know. I need to process this. The violence, the moral ambiguity, the danger. I need to. I looked at him. This man who'd somehow become essential to me. I need to understand your world before I can decide if I can live in it. Something like hope flickered in his eyes. You're not running?
No.
I'm not running. I moved closer to him. But I can't make this decision blindly. If we're going to be together, if I'm going to be part of your life fully, I need to see it. All of it. Not just the beautiful penthouse and the father who sings lullabies. I need to see the parts you've been protecting me from. That's dangerous too, you know. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I know. But I'd rather face the truth than live in a comfortable lie. He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, I'll show you. Everything. The businesses, the people, the decisions I have to make. You can observe, ask questions, see how this world actually operates. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. But Donna, if at any point you decide you can't do this, can't be with me, I won't hold it against you. I won't stop protecting you, won't fire you, won't punish you for it. And if I decide I can? His smile was small, fragile. Then we figure out how to build something real in the middle of all this chaos. I leaned into his touch. I'm scared.
Good.
You should be. I'm terrified too. He pulled me close, wrapped his arms around me. I'm terrified that you'll see who I really am and realize you can't love that person. That I'll lose you before I've really had you. Or maybe I'll see who you really are and love you anyway. Maybe. He pressed his lips to my forehead. We start tomorrow. I have a meeting with some business partners, legitimate ones, but you'll see how I operate.
How people respond to me.
It's not violent, but it's instructive. Okay. We stood there in the study, holding each other, balanced on the knife's edge between the life I'd known and the life I was choosing. Rachel would say I was insane. Maybe I was. But I'd spent too many years playing it safe, staying small, avoiding risk. For the first time in my life, I was choosing something that terrified me. Choosing to see the truth, even if it destroyed the fantasy. Choosing love, even if it came wrapped in danger and moral complexity and questions I couldn't answer yet. Thank you, Jaewon whispered against my hair. For not running. For giving me a chance to show you. Thank you for being honest. Even when the truth is ugly. We stayed like that until the night deepened around us. Two people trying to build something impossible, hoping that honesty and love might be enough to bridge the gap between our worlds.
Knowing it might not be.
Choosing to try anyway. The education began the next morning at a warehouse in Long Island City. Jaewon drove us himself, no driver, just the two of us in a sleek sedan with bulletproof panels I tried not to think about. His hand found mine across the console. This is one of my import operations, he explained as we pulled up to a nondescript building. Legitimate. We bring in Korean goods, food products, textiles, electronics. It employs 43 people, most of them first-generation immigrants. Inside, the warehouse hummed with activity. Workers moved between pallets, operating forklifts, checking inventory. The moment Jaewon entered, the energy shifted. Not fear exactly, but acute awareness. Respect. Men and women bowed slightly, called out greetings in Korean. He knew their names, asked about sick relatives, congratulated someone on a daughter's college acceptance. Mr. Lee paid for her tuition, an older woman told me in accented English, her eyes shining. Full ride. She's studying engineering. I watched him move through the space, saw how people gravitated toward him. The warehouse manager showed him shipping manifests, asked his opinion on expanding to the West Coast. Jaewon listened with full attention, asked sharp questions, made decisions that would affect dozens of livelihoods.
This was power too.
Not the violent kind, but no less absolute. Over the following weeks, he showed me more. A restaurant in Koreatown where the elderly owner gripped his hand and blessed him for intervening when thugs had tried to extort protection money. A community center he funded where immigrant kids got free tutoring and meals. A meeting with his inner circle, 6 men who'd been with him for years, who spoke in a mixture of Korean and English, who treated him with a loyalty that bordered on reverence. These men would die for me, Jaewon said quietly after the meeting. Some have killed for me, but I'd die for them too. That's the code. Family, blood or chosen, comes first. Always. I met Min-soo, his second in command, a man with intelligent eyes and a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. You make him smile, Min-soo told me in Korean. I haven't seen that in years. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I met Jin-ho, who handled finances and had an MBA from Morton. The legitimate businesses aren't a front, he explained over coffee. They're the future. Mr. Lee is building something that can outlast the old ways. Something his daughter can inherit without shame. I saw the complexity, the contradiction, the way Jaewon navigated between worlds with a code of honor that made sense within its own logic, even if it didn't align with the law.
But he also courted me.
Really courted me. A private dinner at a restaurant that overlooked the Hudson, where we talked for hours about everything except his business. He asked about my childhood, my time in foster care, listening with an intensity that made me feel seen in ways I'd never experienced. You survived so much, he said, his fingers laced with mine across the table. You're stronger than you know. An exhibition at a gallery in Chelsea featuring contemporary Korean artists. He guided me through it with the knowledge of someone who'd studied art seriously, explaining techniques and cultural context. I buy pieces sometimes, he admitted. For Jiun. I want her to grow up surrounded by her heritage, the beautiful parts. And then a weekend at a coastal estate in the Hamptons, a house he owned but rarely used, all windows and ocean views. Mrs. Kong came to stay with Jiun, giving us 2 days alone. We walked the beach at dawn, his hand warm in mine. Made breakfast together in a kitchen that felt wonderfully normal. Read books in comfortable silence. Talked about everything: his parents' journey from Korea, my isolation as a Black woman in predominantly white foster homes, the ways trauma shapes us. My father died when I was 25, he said one evening, watching the sunset from the deck. Heart attack.
Sudden.
The family business, both sides of it, fell to me. I wasn't ready. Made mistakes. People died because of my inexperience. His voice roughened. I learned quickly. Had to. Do you ever wish you could have chosen differently? Every day. And also never.
He turned to me.
This life gave me Jiyoon. It gave me the resources to help my community. And somehow, impossibly, it gave me you. How do I regret the path that led here? That night, when he kissed me on the deck with the ocean crashing below, I understood something fundamental. I wasn't falling in love with the good parts and tolerating the bad. I was accepting the whole man, the ruthless boss and the devoted father, the criminal and the patron, the killer and the man who sang lullabies. He was all of it. Inseparable. Complicated. Human. On our last morning there, drinking coffee while the sun rose over the Atlantic, I said it out loud. I want this. I want to be with you. His cup paused halfway to his mouth. You're sure? I'm terrified. But yes, I'm sure. I turned to face him fully. But I have conditions. Name them. Absolute honesty. No more protecting me from difficult truths. If something's happening, if there's danger, I need to know. Done. Jiyoon always comes first. Before us, before your business, before everything. Her well-being is non-negotiable. I wouldn't have it any other way. And I keep my independence. My own work, my own money, my own identity. I'm not becoming some mafia wife who exists in your shadow. He smiled at that. Donna, I don't think you could exist in anyone's shadow if you tried. That's part of why I love you. So we're really doing this? We're really doing this. He set down his coffee, pulled me close. You and me. Building something new. Something that's ours. It's going to be complicated. Everything worth having is. I kissed him, tasting coffee and salt air and promise. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I need to tell Jiyoon, he said. She deserves to understand what this means. How do you think she'll react? Are you kidding? She's been asking me for weeks why I smile so much when you're around. His laugh was soft. She'll be thrilled. He was right. That evening, after we returned to the penthouse, we sat Jiyoon down in her playroom. She looked between us with 6-year-old wisdom, waiting. Jiyoon, Jaewon began in Korean. Donna, and I want to talk to you about something important. You love each other, she said matter-of-factly. I know. I laughed, surprised. How did you know? You look at each other the way Mama and Daddy used to look at each other. Before. Her little face grew serious. Does this mean Donna is staying forever? Jaewon looked at me, then back at his daughter. Would you like that? Jiyoon launched herself at both of us, wrapping her arms around our necks.
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. Donna can be my new mom. My throat tightened. Jaewon's eyes were suspiciously bright as he held both of us. Not quite yet, he said gently. But we're a family now. The 3 of us. Is that okay? More than okay. Jiyoon beamed. Can we have hotteok to celebrate? Absolutely, I said, kissing her forehead. Let's make them together. Later, after Jiyoon was asleep and we stood in the hallway outside her room, Jaewon pulled me close. Thank you, he whispered, for choosing this, for choosing us. Thank you for showing me who you really are. All of it. No more secrets. No more secrets. We'd crossed the final threshold. Whatever came next, danger or joy or the complicated mess of building a life together, we'd face it as partners. I'd chosen love with my eyes wide open. And I never felt more certain of anything in my life. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 months after Jaewon and I made our relationship official. I was walking back from the corner market with Jiyoon, her hand in mine, chattering about the art project we'd planned for the afternoon. The security team followed at their usual discreet distance, two men I'd come to recognize, to trust. I didn't see the van until it was too late. It screeched to a stop beside us. Doors flew open. Three men moving fast. I shoved Jiun behind me on pure instinct, my body understanding the danger before my mind could catch up. One of them grabbed my arm, yanking hard enough to make me stumble. Then everything exploded into controlled chaos. Our security team moved like they'd trained for exactly this scenario, because they had. Gunshots cracked the air. Jiun screamed. I wrapped myself around her, hitting the pavement hard, covering her with my body. Someone was shouting in Korean. Tires squealed. More shots. And then silence, except for Jiun's terrified sobbing against my chest. Ms. Turner. One of our guards, Dae-hyun, was crouching beside us, his weapon still drawn. Blood streaked his arm. Are you hurt?
No.
No, we're okay. My voice shook. Jiun, baby, are you okay? She clung to me, nodding frantically, unable to speak. The attempted kidnappers were on the ground, one dead, two subdued and bleeding. Dae-hyun was already on his phone, speaking rapid Korean. Within minutes, more of Jaewon's men arrived. Someone draped a jacket over Jiun's head, so she couldn't see the bodies. Someone else guided us into an armored SUV. We were back at the penthouse within 10 minutes. Mrs. Kong took Jiun immediately, checking her over, murmuring soothing Korean while the little girl cried. I stood in the entryway, shaking, my knees finally giving out as the adrenaline crashed. Jaewon wasn't home. He was across town in a meeting, unaware. But Min-soo was there within 20 minutes, his face grim. They were Park Ji-ho's men, he told me in the living room, after checking that Jiun couldn't hear. A rival organization. They've been making moves for months, testing boundaries. This was their declaration of war. They were trying to take me, to get to Jaewon. Yes. His expression was apologetic but unflinching. You're his weakness now. They know that. The words settled like stones in my stomach. This was what Jaewon had warned me about. What I'd said I could handle. But knowing it intellectually and experiencing armed men trying to drag you into a van while a child you loved clung to you were entirely different things. Jaewon arrived an hour later. I heard him before I saw him, his voice sharp, demanding answers from his security team in the hallway. Then he was there, crossing the living room in 4 strides, pulling me against him with barely controlled desperation. Are you hurt? His hands moved over me, checking for injuries. Jiun, we're fine. We're both fine. Your guards did their job. Thank God. He pulled back, his eyes scanning my face. Donna, I'm so sorry. This should never have. It's not your fault. It's absolutely my fault. Something dark and furious moved behind his eyes. They used you to get to me. That makes it my fault. Over the next hour, his men came and went with updates. The 2 surviving attackers had been taken somewhere I didn't ask about. Park Ji-ho had gone to ground. Jaewon issued orders in a voice I'd never heard before. Cold, clinical, absolutely merciless. This was the other side of the man I loved. The side that built empires and destroyed threats without hesitation. He disappeared for 6 hours. When he came back, it was past midnight. I'd been sitting in the darkened living room, unable to sleep, replaying the attack over and over. He walked in, and I saw the blood on his shirt before I saw his face. Is that your blood? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Some of it. He stood in the doorway, not coming closer. Donna, you need to leave. What? This isn't going to stop. Park Ji-ho declared war today, and he'll keep coming. As long as you're here, as long as you're mine, you're a target. His voice cracked. I can't. I won't let you die, because of me. You need to leave. Tonight. We'll set you up somewhere safe, somewhere far from here, with protection until this is resolved. I stood slowly. No. This isn't a negotiation. You're right. It's not. I crossed to him, looked him dead in the eye. I'm not leaving. Donna, you don't understand what's coming. I'm going to burn his organization to the ground. It's going to be violent and ugly and dangerous. I'm trying to protect you. By pushing me away? By making decisions about my life without me. I grabbed his bloody shirt. I knew what I was signing up for.
You warned me.
I chose this anyway. That was before someone tried to kidnap you in broad daylight. And I'm still choosing it. My voice rose. I'm terrified, Jaewon. I'm shaking inside. But I'm not running. I'm not letting them win by driving me away from you, from Jiun, from this family. You could die. I could die crossing the street. I could die 1,000 different ways. I soften my voice. But I won't die from walking away from the people I love. That's not dying, that's just a different kind of not living. His control finally cracked. He pulled me against him, burying his face in my hair. I'm so afraid of losing you. Then don't push me away. Fight for me. Fight for us. I held him tight. We do this together or not at all. Together, he whispered. God help us both. The next 3 weeks were tense. Jaewon's men moved with military precision, dismantling Park Ji-ho's operations piece by piece. I didn't ask for details. Didn't want to know specifics. But I saw the results. Rivals surrendering, territories shifting, a message sent that was apparently heard across every syndicate on the East Coast. You don't touch Lee Jaewon's family. Slowly, carefully, life returned to something resembling normal. Jiun's nightmares from the attack faded with therapy and time. She started calling me, casually one evening, like it had always been natural, and my heart nearly burst. 6 weeks after the attack, Jaewon asked me to join him on the rooftop garden after Jiun was asleep. The space had been transformed. String lights, candles, a table set for 2 with a meal that smelled incredible. The city spread out below us, glittering and endless. What's all this? I asked. A conversation. He pulled out my chair, his hands gentle. In Korean, if you'll allow it. We sat. He poured wine with slightly shaking hands, and I realized he was nervous. Donna, he began in Korean, his voice soft. 6 months ago, you walked into my life and changed everything. You gave my daughter her voice back. You gave me hope when I thought I'd lost it forever. You chose to love me even after seeing who I really am. Jaewon. Let me finish. He smiled, reached across the table for my hand. I've lived a complicated life. Made choices I can't undo. But loving you, building this family with you, that's the first choice I've made that feels completely right. He stood, moved around the table, and lowered himself to one knee. My breath caught. I'm not promising you an easy life, he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. I can't promise there won't be danger or complications. But I can promise that I will love you with everything I am. That I will protect you and honor you and choose you every single day. He opened the box, revealing a ring that caught the candlelight. Marry me, Donna. Build this impossible, beautiful life with me. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down my face.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely yes. He slid the ring on my finger, stood, pulled me into his arms. We kissed under the string lights while the city hummed below us, 2 people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate lives and chosen to build something new. 3 months later, we married in a private ceremony in the rooftop garden. 20 guests, his inner circle, Mrs. Kong, Rachel, who'd finally accepted this was real. Jiun was our flower girl, beaming in her white dress, taking her job incredibly seriously. As Jaewon and I exchanged vows in both English and Korean, I thought about the path that had led here. The lost little girl in the park. The dangerous man with sad eyes. The choice to stay when every logical instinct said run. I'd planned a different life once. A safe life. A predictable one. Instead, I'd chosen this, complicated and dangerous and beautiful beyond measure. A man who'd built an empire in the shadows. A daughter who called me mom. A family that existed outside every conventional definition, but felt more real than anything I'd ever known. I love you, Jaewon whispered as we were pronounced married, his forehead resting against mine. I love you too, I whispered back. All of you. Forever. June crashed into both of us, wrapping her arms around our legs. We're a real family now. We always were, Jaewon said, scooping her up. Now it's just official. The three of us stood there in the fading light, holding each other, while our unconventional families celebrated around us. I'd found my purpose in the most unexpected place, not in the life I'd planned, but in the life I'd been brave enough to choose. Our family was complicated, dangerous, unconventional, and it was perfectly, impossibly ours. Donna found her family in the most unexpected place. If this story moved you, if it made you believe in second chances and unconventional love, subscribe and become part of our community. And tell me, what would you have done in Donna's shoes? Would you have stayed? Let me know in the comments below.